Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to build an awesome 4K capable gaming PC that's going to be able to play the latest AAA titles, but you want to get the best bang for buck possible, you want something that is going to have a lot of longevity, isn't going to be, well, redundant in the next few months, then you know what? It's actually going to be quite tricky because, especially at the higher end, we are expecting new graphics cards to come out imminently. So the dilemma is, do you build something now and then in a few months' time potentially wished you'd waited, or do you wait and then maybe find that the products aren't as good as you'd hoped, or stock availability is rubbish, or a bit of both? It's hard to actually gauge what the right thing is going to do. So what I thought we'd do in this video is pretty much build what I would say is the best all-round high-end gaming PC right now, and one that, as we're described throughout this video, is going to have a lot of longevity. Throughout this video, we're going to show all of the components that we have inside this build. We're going to show you how easy or difficult it is to assemble, and of course we're going to show you those all-important gameplay benchmark numbers, so if you want to build something like this yourself, you know exactly how this thing performs. So join us as we help you to navigate these potentially treacherous waters, after a massive thank you to Seagate for proudly sponsoring this video. More about this drive in just a second. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that if you're looking to build a gaming PC over the next few months really, it's potentially going to be a little bit tricky because you don't exactly know what the best decision is going to be. You've got two choices. You can either lock in the components that we have available now, you know exactly what you're going to get, you can look at benchmarks, you can look at videos like this, we can see the current pricing, we can work out the value. Or the other option is to wait for potentially 2 or 3 months, get one of these new high-end and maybe even mid-range graphics cards when they come out, but for a whole variety of reasons that we can go into them. Basically, if you live in the US, there is a chance we're going to see some extra tariffs on some of the graphics cards that will be coming in, and that price could potentially be passed on to you. We've also got increased manufacturing costs. We've got more inflation versus when the last cards come out. And if they are going to be more powerful, things like the RTX 5090, then obviously this means that the price of these components could potentially go up, and in some cases it could go up quite dramatically. And if the performance of these parts aren't even that dramatically different to what we have now, and there could potentially be stock issues, then it might be that there are going to be people that would have rather that they had actually got something now rather than be potentially waiting, and then like we had last time, you can't get anything until the summer, and then, well, you want to be outside by then. So ramble aside, there's not like a one size fits all. It kind of depends really what you need. If you actually don't have a gaming PC right now and you want to build it like 2024, very early 2025, you want to lock it in, then as long as you're not buying something at a like astronomical price, I think it is going to be worth doing, as long as you are aware, as I say, that the graphics cards are about to be replaced. But on the AMD side of things, we have less information than the NVIDIA side. So is that clear? Does that help? Normally we'd be building by now, but I think that bit's important because it's kind of the elephant in the room. But the other way we've actually given our PC a little bit extra longevity is by going for a newer platform. So this is an X870 motherboard. It's kind of very similar to B650E, to be honest. Should support higher memory overclocking, which is good, and also does come with USB 4 as standard, which is nice. But then the sponsor of today's video, Seagate, have actually sent out this new drive. This is the Seagate FireCuda 530R, and just by chance actually on the side I have one of the original 530s here. I've used loads of these on the channel. I've actually got a couple in my personal gaming PC as well. No issues with them, super fast drives. And actually I've got to say that it's not just like the raw performance of this drive that I find impressive, because whilst you do have insane speeds, so it goes up to 7,400 megabytes a second on the reads, you've got great like random 4K reads as well. This is going to be a fantastic drive for pretty much any application. If you want to do games on it, direct storage, or anything creative where you need a fast drive, obviously it's going to be fantastic. But I think the thing to really pay attention to as well is also the endurance of the drive. So if you compare this with some of its competition, I think you're going to be very impressed. So for the 4 terabyte version of this, you get 5,050 terabyte writes is what it's rated for, whereas some of the competition is like the very close competition is only 2,400. So that's a massive difference. And if you are going to be putting personal data on your SSD on your gaming PC, obviously you want to buy something that is going to have very good longevity. And it does also come with 3 years of their rescue support as well, and you get a 5-year warranty on the drive itself. So a pretty darn good option, right? And I'm also really pleased to say that if you do want to win your very own Seagate FireCuda 530R SSD, then you can. Just go down to the comment section below, find my pinned comment where we have all of the instructions that will tell you everything that you need to do, including those lovely terms and conditions. But at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I do realize I've been waffling a lot and we've not built anything. So shall we crack on? And we're going to start with our motherboard. So this is the X870 Pro RX RS Wi-Fi from ASRock. It's pretty intriguing because what I often find is that if you do want to go for an all-white build, it's very difficult as it is to just find components that will fit, let alone find components that will actually fit in that are a bit more accessible when it comes to price. Well, that is exactly what this board sets out to do. So you have this white kind of snow effect to the PCB, so it's going to go in like a hybrid black and white build as well if you want to do that. We do have Wi-Fi, we do have USB 4 of course, as that is mandated on this particular chipset. We do have some decent cooling for the VRMs, and then we do have our M.2 slots of course for our Seagate FireCuda 530R drive. This one looks fairly toolless. I'll drop this down on top of the box like you're supposed to, and then we can see if we can get our SSD installed. Yes, okay, slightly stiff, but does work. Obviously do make sure that you do remove the protective film on this. Then we can actually grab our drive out of the box. This is the 2TB version, but there it is, our 530R. Gently lower that into place, clicks in like that. And then of course we get our heatsink and just drop that down. With our SSD installed, we can then press on to our choice of CPU. And the reason that we're going for this, which is the Ryzen 7 7700, it is an 8-core chip, it's just because in terms of value, you can't really get much better than this because there's not like a crazy difference in price between the 6-core 7600 and then the 8-core 7700. But as soon as you want to step it up to an X3D chip, it goes up quite a lot, especially at the moment, the availability is just not great. So for the sake of £50 or dollars, yes, I probably would step it up, but realistically, if you're looking at like $100, $150 more, and obviously more than that if you're looking at like the 9800 X3D, then at this level, it's not necessarily going to be like a night and day difference really, and I'd personally rather have a better graphics card than a better CPU. It does obviously depend if you're playing like something multiplayer at low settings, 1080p, then yes, you will need a really good CPU, but for most people, this is going to be the sweet spot really, and it's going to enable you to get a better graphics card for your PC within the same budget. And then we can press on and grab our RAM, and as you'd probably expect, 6000 megahertz, something that has an Expo profile, is white to match our theme, and is 32 gig of DDR5 capacity. That is the way that we're going. This is some Delta R. I think it's pretty nice looking RAM actually, and it's relatively low profile for RGB, which is nice. Just drop this in slots 2 and 4. And then comes the bit when I know I'm going to get people moaning down the camera lens.
Oh, PC Centric, you've used this cooler loads recently. I want to see an all-in-one.
You go for an all-in-one if you want, but I'm telling you, when it comes to value for money, you are going to be overspending if you are trying to maximize bang for buck, which is what essentially we're trying to do here. So this is my favorite air cooler, probably my favorite cooler, to be honest, period. This is the Arctic Freezer 36 ARGB, and as you can tell, it does come in white or black, depending on obviously the case that you're going for, and it's so easy to install, and the performance of this is awesome. Even, and I think we will, if you want to like turn on PBO and maybe like overclock your chip a little bit, I still think this is going to cope. If you did go for a higher like TDP chip that wasn't 65 watts, you're going to get higher temps obviously. I wouldn't pair this with like a 14900K, but for most CPUs, this is going to be a great choice. Remove the default AM5 mounting hardware, whack on the plastic spaces, bar on top, screw it down into place, a little bit of thermal compound in the middle. Then we can pick up our cooler, gently line this up with the socket, gently secure this down, nice even pressure. Make sure they are actually blowing the way that you want, which is usually going to be that way. And then they quite literally just push into place. Then we can plug in our headers at the top of the board. These ones are for fan speed, whereas this is for addressable RGB. And once you've done that then, I think your motherboard combination is now complete. I mean, it is going to get a little bit top heavy, so I would actually recommend that as long as you've screwed it down properly, they do kind of like hold it via the cooler now, so that's nice and secure. But it's a good looking board, isn't it, and a good looking CPU cooler. But let's get this put to one side for a second, because we can move on to the case, which is the Montech Sky 2 GX. And we have actually built on this before, and it's just a pretty solid case really. I wouldn't say it's like the best thing ever, but there's not really much wrong with it. All depends on the price that you get it for. Main one really being that for a budget-friendly chassis, this has loads of features, loads of airflow, decent amount of fans actually, and the build quality is good. It's not one of these cases that you kind of just feel and wish you hadn't bought. This is just good all round really, and I like the fact that you have this like door with the glass, nice solid glass as well, which is good. Another place they haven't skimped out on. They've made it a little bit smaller to save cost, but then you get a bit of extra airflow down the bottom. If you want to put fans and things here, you can, but I think the real value comes from a case like this, just using it as it is. As long as you tune the case fans down and you're not putting something crazy in this, you're going to be absolutely fine. But I think they've done a good job on the paint on this actually as well. It doesn't seem to be particularly prone to scratching or anything, and it looks pretty even. It's a nice white rather than an off-white, which is good. We do have USB Type-C on the top, 2 USB 3s as well. This is definitely not the highest quality thing in the world, but it's absolutely fine. It's a side panel. We'll get the job done, and then once you get inside, look, you can actually open this up if you want and put extra fans here. You can use it like this now, and then maybe if you wanted to upgrade it later, you can do that. You don't have to completely swap out your case. Like that. The only thing to report is that the cables here are black. I'd prefer that they were white if you wanted to do like a full snow build, but with this, where we've got quite a lot of black in it anyway, it's going to be absolutely fine. Let's grab our box of fun from down the bottom. Then we can drop this down into position. Pick up our motherboard again with that cooler. Make sure no cables are snagging, but definitely not an issue here. There, we can just line that up, and then you can, after this central hole here to catch on the case. There we are, just like that. Oh, we've got nice silver screws for the looks of it though. That definitely helps if you want to go for a snow build. Let's screw the board down then. And then once you've done that, you should be left with what is actually very close to kind of a finished gaming PC. And do you see what I mean? The motherboard, the cooler, the case, it all ties in, and I think this is going to look absolutely fantastic. And we've also got a power supply with white cables. So again, everything will tie in very nicely. But obviously, if you did want to go for a more normal black build, well, all of these components are really available in black, so just obviously adjust accordingly, really. The graphics card is the next component that I will do, but before we get to that, I would actually advise that you do your cabling now, as it just does make it slightly easier. So very simple, intimidates a lot of people, but as long as you know where it goes, you can't really go too far wrong. Starting at the top, we've got our USB 3. Just below that, you've got your USB Type-C. Next to that, you've got your chassis fan, addressable RGB, and then you can pick up your HD audio, and that just connects at the bottom left. Well, let's clear ourselves some room, shall we? And then we can press on to my favorite bit of any gaming PC. It's the real heart of your system. If you're going to maximize gaming performance, obviously the graphics card is always the component you should prioritize more than anything else. This is the 7900 XT from AMD. This is a 20 gigabyte of VRAM card, and that's the main reason we've gone for this in this kind of like longevity look into the future GPU, because whilst I'm sure this will get replaced in the coming months, the performance obviously isn't dramatically going to change. There'll be some driver updates, you might get a little bit more out of it in like optimized titles and things, but generally speaking, you know what you're getting with this. So as long as you're happy to like use FSR really, and you're happy to not have like path tracing enabled, some ray tracing on this is going to be fine, but it's not a priority for you, you're going to absolutely fall in love with what this card offers, because for what most people actually want from their gaming PC, which is loads of performance in titles like Warzone, Apex Legends, like AAAs, as I say, as long as you're not like turning on ray tracing to like ultra settings in every game and playing 4K with no FSR, this is going to be awesome. Now, getting hold of a white one is quite difficult. I'll leave some links down below, including to like a more silver mirror one that looks quite cool, but if you want to see what a white GPU would actually look like in this system, I have you covered here, because this is one that is sitting on the side very neatly. It's end of life because it's an original 4070 Ti rather than the Super, which is really sad because that looks awesome, doesn't it? Is that not just like the best looking graphics card you've ever seen? Well, we're not using it, we're using that. You tell me, is this hideous? Is this completely the wrong theme? Do you even care? I mean, okay, I would, as I say, I would rather have a white one, but we can use this as our reference system. It's a reference GPU. This is our reference system, and obviously, as I say, I'll leave links to some white GPUs down below, but the performance and the acoustics, thermals aren't going to be like dramatically different. But let's get that screwed down with those same screws. We can then tidy up some of these cables. Cable as you go, or tidy as you go, is always recommended. But then speaking of cables, we probably should crack on now to the final piece of the puzzle, which is our power supply. This is the RM850. 850 it's not necessarily necessary, but at this end of the market, it's not that much more than a 750, and it just gives you that longevity, as I say. So if you do want to upgrade your graphics card to something more beefy, you can without upgrading your power supply. Only thing I'll say about this that's a little bit annoying, if you get a GPU that has one of those PCI Gen 5 connections, like the 12, 16 pin, then it doesn't actually come with like a native cable. You can buy one like third party, fine, but we don't need it here today, so it doesn't matter. But bear that one in mind if you are upgrading to 50 series. Let's whack in our cables. This just sits down the bottom in the basement. Then you can screw it down into place. Remember, fan facing downwards. Then you want to get your power cables and feed them through to their respective positions. So the large ATX goes here. We have our CPU. I think you could actually get away with just using one, but just for neatness, we are going to use two. Those go up here at the top right. We can plug in that SATA for the fan hub now. And then speeding round to the other side, then we can plug our 8-pin in at the top. Repeat with the other side. Then we could get our ATX Oh, drop that in. You won't have to stretch as much, I just have to do this on camera. And then I believe that is our final connection, and we are set up and hopefully now ready to go. But other than the fact that the graphics card isn't quite the right color for this, I think everything works quite nicely, really. And again, reminder, if you did want to open this up, then this whole thing actually will remove. There it is. Yeah, this whole panel that comes out like that. And then if you did want to add extra fans or things there, you can. I think the main advantage of this would be if you're going to put like a 360 rad at the front, then you wanted more ventilation, obviously you could do that and everything will still look neat. Better show you the back as well, look. I haven't done anything with this whatsoever, but we didn't really add much, so yeah, pretty impressed. Should we see if it works? So let's grab our monitor then, and of course our keyboard, mouse, and the lovely PC-Centric mouse mat, available at pccentric.store. We've got this connected over DisplayPort. Everything, I believe, is turned on. So will this work? Well, that's always promising. Good to see lights. I mean, let's actually move this over so you can see properly, shall we? We've not got anything on screen yet. Hang on. I saw an ASRock logo. Yes! I also want to point out as well that they've kind of matched the theme look. We've got a white BIOS as well. We've got our 7700, 32 gig of RAM. So obviously what we need to do is go into advanced. No, actually I don't think it is in there. Back into OC Tweaker, and here it is, DRAM frequency below that DRAM profile configuration. This is where we set our Expo profile to Expo 6000, CL30. And then the other thing I wanted to test that I wouldn't normally do is just to overclock the CPU, so I don't recommend that you do this out of the box unless you absolutely know what you're doing. But I'm going to go CPU overclocking, I'm going to say customize. No, that's not what I want at all. I'm going to go for performance preset, and then I'm going to find this one called PBO, and I'm going to go for curve optimizer -20 with a max of 85 degrees. So I'm going to save, changes, and exit. Don't forget as well, it makes sense to actually tune the CPU cooler fans so that you know that it's not going to make a load of noise when it doesn't need to, but I'll do that after a check that the overclock works essentially. But we will of course also need to install Windows, so I probably wouldn't have actually done it this way round. Overclock last after everything else is set up. But to install Windows, it is very straightforward. Just make sure you have a copy of Windows on a USB flash drive. Then you can whack this in the back of your system, wait for everything to restart, load into the Windows loader, and then just follow all of the instructions, and then you'd be set. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, the irony. This is the second time I've now done this intro because I started recording a load of stuff about Warzone, and ironically, what I said was, so far so good, everything seems to be working properly. But I have actually run into the exact same issue that I had on the last system I built with Call of Duty Warzone, where it just does not seem to be working properly. And rather than cut it out the video, I want you to see this firsthand, maybe see if you can offer some advice, but I just don't think this is working properly, right? Because we've currently got this set to what I would say competitive settings, 1440p, and we're only getting around about 75 FPS. So usually I'd say, oh, well, we're just bottlenecked by the CPU, which is a little bit of a shame, but you know, you could upgrade your CPU to get an even higher frame rate. But there is no way that 72 FPS is accurate. I mean, Carl will actually show up some footage now from earlier where we were getting over double this. It just seems as if Call of Duty, for whatever reason, just is not working properly at the moment, and I just don't understand why, which makes this really frustrating. And the honest truth is that I have a friend that he bought a PC specifically for Warzone. He was on a PlayStation 5 before, playing Warzone all of the time, and he moved across to PC because he was hoping he would have a much better experience. And every time I speak to him, he says, I still just mainly play it on the PlayStation, to be honest with you. And I'm like, why would you do that? It's PC gaming. And he says, well, Warzone for me just doesn't seem to work properly. And as someone that doesn't play Warzone, when I see stuff like this, it just makes me really sad, because the whole point of PC gaming is that it's supposed to be a better experience. But when you're leaving 40% of your graphics card on the table, I don't really know. To be fair, maybe it's because we're running this on the latest version of Windows. Maybe if you are on like 2023, it wouldn't be like this. But I don't know. Let me know. Have you seen issues like this before? Because this is clearly not working properly. This is not representative of this PC. Sorry to start on a bummer. Sometimes that is just the way. Hate Warzone! So let us instead move on then and just take a little bit of a breather for a second and enjoy what is some Apex Legends, which, as we know, for ages was my pick of the town when it comes to video games. Granted, not so much recently. I think it's not that I burnt myself out on it. I just find that I'm not actually that good, and everyone that I was playing against got very good, and so I just moved on to something else. As you know, I'm like a Fortnite no build guy now, but that annoys a lot of you, and you know what? I don't really care. But anyway, what you're seeing here is actually actually set to competitive settings. So this is 1440p, high preset, and as you can see, we're getting pretty close to that FPS cap actually. So we're currently getting around about 295 FPS, which is pretty ridiculous. I do wish that they did have some form of like FSR or DLSS in this, so that you could actually like kind of run this between 1440 and 4K. But realistically, I would highly advise that you do play this at 1440p, really, just obviously to be as competitive as possible. But if you are playing on a 4K monitor like this, then you might feel like you are leaving a little bit on the table. So let's go into the options menu and actually change this to 4K. And then when we come back, what has that done to the FPS? Well, it obviously has lowered it down. But I mean, 200 FPS at 4K high settings is not too shabby whatsoever, is it? I mean, obviously the game is ridiculously pin sharp now. This is a 27-inch monitor, but if you had this on a 32, obviously it would look even better. But I've got to say that Apex Legends is just a game that seems to run really well. I very rarely have any issues with it. We're not getting any form of stutter or anything. You can see we've got a nice smooth frame time graph, and when we are getting like a minimum of around about 140, 150 FPS at 4K, the world is your oyster really. Pick whatever settings you want and it should run quite well. This is running in the DX12 mode, but it shouldn't really make too much difference. Actually, I'm running out of time. I'm just compiling the shaders for Dragon Age, and I realized that everything was running at 100%, including the overclock, and we hit a high of 87 degrees on our CPU cooler, and the whole thing was basically still as silent as you can get. I was sat in this room being really boring, reading the news. Perhaps more importantly then, we should actually press on and show you the gameplay, as I say, of the game that I am playing at the moment. This is some Dragon Age Veilguard, and I've been really enjoying it. I don't think it's the absolute best game I've ever played in the world, but it's a really attractive game, and I've only really been running this on NVIDIA cards, so it's interesting to see how this does fare actually on some AMD hardware. We've got this set to the Ultra preset, ray tracing is off, but we do also have FSR set to balanced as well. And I'd say that again, this looks great really. I don't have any qualms with this whatsoever. I would always advise, even with FSR, even if it's an older version, certainly trying it out, because if you have a really high resolution screen, especially 4K, you've got a lot of upscaling that you can do, and you'd be surprised that you don't necessarily need like a really high base resolution. Whereas actually I think a lot of people that are maybe playing on like a 1080p screen, they turn FSR on and they realize that it just doesn't look great, and then they kind of write it off forever. But I promise, if you're going for like 1440p, but especially 4K, it's a dramatic difference versus the technology at lower resolution. So I'll definitely give it a go. But yes, around about 85 to 100 FPS or so at the moment. So this is looking great, and it's running very well as well. But as I say, the ray tracing is currently off. You can use the selective mode, which is what I'd recommend, so it's only on in areas where you're really going to notice it. But that's not great for testing because you don't know whether it's on or off. So we're going to force this on now, and we'll see what sort of difference that actually makes. Well, not that dramatic. I don't think the ray tracing in this is, it's not heavy, it's just not like, you know, like Alan Wake path tracing, like kind of like level, right? So it has lowered down our frame rate, but only by like, what's that, 15, 20 FPS or so actually in this particular instance. And the game still feels nice and smooth. Obviously it will affect the latency because it's more in the pipeline that's going on. But yeah, there's no doubt about it that a really nice cinematic game like this with a bit of ray tracing, not a bad shout. But my advice, leave it on selective and do play with FSR if you are going to be playing at 4K. But obviously 1440p, you're going to get even higher frame rates. But from one visually stunning single player game to another, this is Ghost of Tsushima. And as you can see, similar kind of settings here. Ray tracing isn't enabled because it's not actually in this game. We've got this set to the Ultra preset. We're currently running this at 4K. FSR is set to balance. And as you can see, we're getting around about 91 FPS. So actually very similar. And this is why I say, if you do go for something like the 7900 XT, you're kind of getting all the performance that you need really without starting to pay that extra crazy money for an extra like 30, 40 FPS on top of this, that let's be honest, you're not necessarily actually going to need or really be able to take full advantage of. And it's definitely worth noting as well that this is one of those games that does come with FSR frame generation. This works in a very similar way to the frame generation that you find with NVIDIA's DLSS. I find that it actually boosts the frame rate even higher, but maybe the quality is not quite as good. Again, definitely worth experimenting with. If you have this kind of like base level of FPS, then your latency is going to be low enough in the first place. It shouldn't be a big deal. But again, don't try and boost like 30, 40 FPS up to 80 FPS because you'll be feeling the latency of kind of like a 30 FPS game. You'd be better off just turning some other settings down. But you want to go down here. Actually, that was running at FSR quality. There we are. So we could turn that down a little bit if we wanted even higher frame rates. But here we can choose FSR 3 frame gen, turn this on, and then how well is this going to work? I don't think I've actually used it in this game yet. Well, there you go. You can see immediately actually that the frame rate has increased quite dramatically. We're now looking looking at around about 133, 134 FPS. But again, remember that the latency of the game will actually increase, and that's bad. You want the latency to decrease. So just the way that the game feels, you will notice that it's not quite as tight. But I've got to admit that here, I don't think I'd really be able to notice like a dramatic difference, especially if you were going to be playing with a controller or something. You're still able to get this really quite moody actually, but absolutely stunning and gorgeous game running at even higher frame rate. But yeah, this works quite well. And again, all of the games really that we've tested up in Warzone have had this lovely, nice and flat frame time graph, which is exactly what you want to see. It shows that you're not really getting any stutters, and obviously that you've got a good pairing between your graphics card and your CPU. And what most people are actually going to use, which is like gaming on their PC, we're currently getting 56 degrees and the fan's not running at full speed. It's a really, really quiet system. So all in all, I think you're going to absolutely love this. I mean, this is way quieter than something like a PS4 Pro or something was. And we don't have any noise in the room whatsoever. So as soon as you actually get your speakers or headphones on, you're not going to notice this in the slightest. A gaming laptop, this is not. So all in all, I've got to say, I'm actually pretty happy with the PC that we've created today. I mean, yes, okay, the black graphics card doesn't exactly go, but as I say, getting hold of a white GPU is actually a little bit difficult, and I don't really have any, bar that one that's end of life. To demonstrate in this, which is a bit frustrating. But other than that, there's not really that much I would change. I think it's a really nice, attractive case. Obviously, you can build on this for years to come. There's a lot of expandability. There's a lot of airflow if you want to upgrade this to more powerful components. But obviously, what we've got already in this is pretty powerful, and the fact that we're not really creating any noise or any like bad thermals or anything. I mean, the GPU is at 70 degrees, so again, no issues with that whatsoever. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What do you make of our system? Do you think this does have the longevity for the future? Again, I said I'd talk about this, and I suppose I haven't really. The 20 gigabytes of VRAM in combination with the fact that the GPU prices on this have come down, I think makes it a better bet as long as you're happy not to use ray tracing in all of your titles compared to Nvidia, because other than a few sale prices, we're not seeing like that much dramatic movement on the Nvidia cards. Whereas if you can bag yourself a bargain, you're happy with the performance today, you know what you're getting, I think it does make sense. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What would you do? What do you make of our system? And what do you make of the performance? Let us know down in the comment section below. Smash the like button if you've enjoyed this. Get yourself subscribed. And of course, if you do want to check out current pricing on anything that was featured in this video, you can find it listed down below with our affiliate links. But thank you guys so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one.